So this session is going to be kicking us off. And I wanted to kind of be more a little bit introductory. So we might go a whole hour of the content, but mostly the way the sessions are intended to work is Monday is kind of an introduction to what we'll be doing on Wednesday. The main content will be on Wednesday. Okay. One of the things we got in feedback from the first offering was that getting familiar with the Miro boards we're going to use before we use them is useful. So I'm going to go through the Miro board. Some of you probably not use Miro boards. So I'm going to do a little bit of intro. Just takes about 5 minutes, but that 5 minutes makes a big difference. I'm also going to go through a little bit of Thinkific to show you how to move around. That doesn't take too long either, but it's nice to be a little familiar with it. Here, let me move this down here. So part of today is going to be an introduction. Normally Mondays will be a half hour of content, mostly about the boards and the lesson, and then another half hour that you can stay if you want to for Q&A. Also, there are every 4 weeks or so, we have a break for a Q&A session. We found that it kind of got to be a grind the first time. And I have those in my afternoon. So it's like if you're out in Australia or New Zealand, it's like the next day, but it's in the morning and you can attend. So that's why the change in time is there. The Q&A afternoon session for me is there for people in weird time zones compared to, US or Europe. And then the way the things will work on Wednesday is that's where the meat of the session is. That goes for an hour. And then another half hour of Q&A. And I suggest you stay for the Q&A. Usually our Q&A topics have been really good when we talk about things, but I won't be offended if you leave. And of course, everything is recorded. So you can just, if you attend the session and leave, you can always come back to the Q&A and watch that later as they get uploaded. Okay, so let me do a little bit of what the workshop is and how to move around it. And as I do that, as I show you, you'll get to see an introduction to it. And we can do a couple introductions if people like to, but there's actually something that I've set up for that. And there's part of the reason I don't do a lot of interactions in the way you normally would do in a workshop. And this is where the Miro boards come in. Okay, but let's go through and instead of just talking about what we'll do, let me walk through the boards through Thinkific, and then I'll explain why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it, because this is a very different way of training, and I think it's kind of really where the future is going. Unfortunately, not many people are trying this. I've been working on virtual training for well, I started thinking about it 20 years ago. I started doing it about 15 years ago. I've got a lot of experience. It's not just putting on a Zoom of what would have been a live session. It's how do you design for virtual, and we'll see that. Okay, so you can see my screen, right? My courses. This is the dashboard. This is what I've done here. Is I've come in as a like just a regular user, like y'all might, and my dashboard is I'm in the Amplio community of practice, which if you haven't registered for, you really need to, because some of the boards are distributed for this and there's no charge. It's a free thing I do for the community, but I also put certain boards on there. This past Amplio Development Masterclass, I'm in because I took it last time as I led it. If you're not in, don't worry. In fact, I actually don't want people who are in this the first time to go back there. It'll just cause some confusion. It's the same content. It's organized in a different way. There's no point in navigating it. There's nothing there that we're not going to be doing it. This is the one we're doing, the Amplio Development Masterclass. And when you come in, you'll see something like this, okay? It's got an overview. It's got Miro board, supplemental materials. The sessions will be down here. I have only the first one. This is session 1. And then there is an Amplio training program. Okay, if some of you who took the first one, and I'm actually opening this up to anybody, even if you're in this first class, because a lot of people are fairly experienced, but I am setting up a train the trainer program for people to train. This is, we do sessions on this on Tuesday. So if you're interested in this, let me know. I'm not going to talk about it here, but it's something available. So Sometimes you can see this arrow here. See if it's like down, it means you can't see the detail. I push it, I can see what's there. These are two sessions, two things you need to see. So you just pull this up. The Amplio Development Masterclass offering number 2 is here. This is the curriculum. Okay, actually, I don't want to keep opening these up. So you'll sometimes come. So this is the first little bit of Miro board training. Sometimes you'll come in something like this. You should have a this is what's called I call it a start screen. It's where you come in. And if you don't have anything on the left here, you want to click this. And it's telling you that here. You click this and you get these frames. This is the easiest way to navigate. You don't need to navigate it. I could pinch like that and I just pull back. But it's easier if you do navigate, because see, then I can click this and I can jump here. The frames have, and who knows, they keep changing the way this works. They used to have like, you could get pictures or you can get a list of things. Miro just tends to change this. It's irritating to me, but you can navigate through here. So it works. And this is basically the map of what we're doing. Okay, this is not in Thinkific. Please don't share this with anybody. Everybody in the workshop can get it that way. And there's a little bit of information about the sessions up here. This session here, we're going to be doing a challenge board and first principles. It talks about what to read. I don't put everything there. I put the start and the end. Okay, so actually, I just realized I should have pulled this up. So let me just go to success. Oops. Success engineering works. And if you ever forget, so successengineering.works, that should be easy to remember. That's my company. You can always go to resources, the books, and this workshop is based on Amplio Development. That's basically what I wrote. Okay, I can, if I click more details, I can now download the PDF. Okay, so the cool thing about this is this bar here, and basically we're just going to work through the book. Okay, so if I say, and it's designed that way. I mean, actually, this book has changed so many ways and so many orders because I designed it and I designed the workshop to go in the same order, which actually makes sense, because if there's a path to learning, which we'll learn a little bit about that, you'll see that. So when I say part 1 understanding, and then part 1 understanding and then dealing with complexity, that basically means I don't know why I lost the, well, that is weird. There we go. Part 1 understanding to dealing with complexity. You can open these up here. That's basically how far to read. Okay, and you can read faster, you can read slower. You don't have to have read the thing before I cover the materials, but I definitely suggest reading the book. I'm also going to put a copy of this under Google Docs. So if you want to make edits or things like that, I would greatly appreciate that. This is rough. Okay, it's better than it was for the first timers, but it's still a little rough. Okay, so the curriculum basically is designed. We have 12 lessons. See, 12 lessons and a Q&A session, then 3 more Q&A session. Then we take a break over the holidays with a Q&A session. So it's more than a week here, and then we wrap up. Okay. Now, when you're done with this workshop, you're eligible to join another workshop at no charge. That's a 4-month program as well. This material will still be available to you. That's what we call the value stream coach. Okay. It was designed as a 7 or 8 session over 4 months. So it's every other week. So it gets a lot easier to fill in the gaps of the Discipline Agile Value Stream Consultant Workshop. Okay. So it was designed to combine with the DAVSC to be a full-fledged Agile at Scale approach, but you'll be able to understand everything in there. Okay. The topics we cover are not anything new to here, the development. Anyway, coming back, I want to talk a little bit more about the workshop, but I just thought it would be interesting to show you how you get into the boards. Okay. The Amplio Community of Practice, I mentioned you should register for, no charge. This is ongoing. It meets every other Thursday. You don't need to attend any of the sessions, but this is where we distribute about half the Miro boards. Okay. What we do is, if it's something that we've built ourselves, a Miro board we built ourselves, then we distribute it through here. People have to pay for these things. However, we are in the process of converting a lot of boards that have been put out there by other people, just, like after action review, the pre-mortem, and we just made boards out of other people's ideas. So we distribute those through Creative Commons, and we distribute those through the Amplio community of practice. So you have to join, and you'll get an email from me about every other week because of that, but you don't have to attend the sessions to get the boards. It'll just tell you when you have one. So that's what that is. Now, let me explain why I use the boards, because there are two things about Amplio I really want you to understand. Actually, three things that are probably really different. Obviously, the content is different, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But there are two other things that are really important, and they've been ignored pretty much by the Agile community in general. And one is, it does you no good to know something if you can't convey it. Now, that sounds kind of obvious, doesn't it? Really, it doesn't. Well, it does you if you're a practitioner. It does you okay. But look at how much training is out there, and all they do is they teach you stuff. They don't teach you how to convey it. They just teach it to you. Well, we discovered early, I didn't realize this myself, so maybe I shouldn't be so arrogant here. We didn't quite realize this when I started the Amplio Development Workshop the first time, but it got obvious, like first session, second session. So I've integrated into the workshop, basically, if we look at the table of contents here, we have the first half of the book about what Amplio is. And you can see it's like 100 pages or so. And then the second, third, the last part of the book, about a third of it, is about being a professional coach, because this is about how do you convey things to people, okay? And so what we do, coming back to the curriculum, every time there's a lesson, we talk about the boards, we talk about reading the book, we also talk about reading the coaching session. So we're reading the book in parallel. The first part is the content, the second part's the coaching. Now, they're not tied together. I'm reading them this way, so you just don't end up with, oh my God, I got 50 pages I have to read. But they're, in other words, the coaching doesn't relate to the technical. It's totally separate sequences. And in fact, the coaching part could be read by anybody not doing Amplio at all, although it's useful if you read at least the basis of it. So this is one of the things that's integrated into Amplio, is how to coach in it. It also kind of explains why it's designed the way it is. That I learned this when I started becoming a coach. I'd done coaching before and I'd done consulting before, but in 97 or 96, I'd first started doing it as a professional. Like, this was my job title. I'd otherwise built software for 27 years. And now I all of a sudden was coaching people in it. And I had some issues, meaning I wasn't competent and I had to figure it out on the job. So I didn't realize I wasn't competent and had to figure it out on the job till I got on the job, because I'd done a lot of programming and I was good. I was good conveying ideas to people, although I did have some issues with temper at times. And that's in the book, because some of you might have issues. A lot of you don't, but I did. But then I start about how these are topics and these are things I've learned. And this doesn't represent all of it. I continue to expand this. One other thing that'll start happening next week, or later this week, hopefully, I'm making little podcasts for each of these topics, anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes, or usually 5 minutes, but a couple of them have to be long for different reasons. Not that the chapter is long, but anyway. So these will be released on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, just audio, no video. And that's another way to go. But reading them is a little more detailed. The podcasts are a little bit of a summary. Okay, so I'm going to stop for a moment. Questions about what I've covered. I've talked about the coaching part. I'm going to talk about the Miro boards, and then I'm going to get into Amplio itself. But do you have any questions about things I've just done so far? Are we okay? Okay. So why do I use Miro boards? This is the other thing that's different. Okay, so there are actually maybe 4 things that are different. Okay, in fact, I ought to list these and write them down. I don't know, it just seems like sometimes. There's the content. Okay, and by content, I also mean the mindset, and I will definitely get to that. I just wanted to give a background as to why we're training it. there's this integrated coaching. There's the Miro boards. I'm going to explain that in a second. And then there's this, what I will call the incremental delivery. Okay. What was interesting was when I left the PMI now almost a year ago, another couple of weeks, it'll be a year. I took the opportunity to stop and step back and think, what kind of tunnel have I gone down, so to speak? You know, we get started on things, it's hard to break out of our own thought process. And I thought about, what have I gone down that I need to break out of? And what a lot of it was how courses are delivered. Things I knew, things I'd been working on for 15 years at least, but also how the value stream works. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to the content. But why the Miro boards? Okay, obviously with COVID, we need to have a distributed way of doing things. But I've been working on this thing I started around 2000 and actually doing remote training like this. I think it started around 2005, 2007, because there was this question I had that had started bugging me around 20 years ago. That's when it started, really early with net objectives. And the question was this: what if a large company with 20,000 developers in it, just to give a scale of size, not that developers are the only important piece, but I was actually more team-centric 20 years ago. What would I do if some company had 20,000 developers and they said they wanted me to teach their crew of, say, 5 or so transition people to train all 20,000, and I could be involved and I could have maybe one other person of my company involved, but they wanted a low cost, high quality way of training tens of thousands of people. And that question occurred to me around 2002. I can still remember this because it's an interesting question, because if you're going to change the world, you've got it. And I am up to that. I know that's kind of arrogant, but not by myself. I actually think the IT is so badly done that we could basically improve productivity by tens, if not hundreds of trillions of dollars if we did it right. That's a big if. I'm not actually saying I expect to see that happen, but the potential is amazing when my sense is that companies work at about 5 to 10% of their capability. And there are lots of trillions of dollars there. But anyway, I asked that question. And one of the things that was very clear was that you had to teach in an effective way, and that meant you had to teach incrementally, because people lose most of the information when they go to a 2 or 3 day course. It also has to be able to be taught by the people in the organization, because they know their problem better than I know their problem. And then that meant, though, if you're going to teach it incrementally, and given these are global companies, it has to be done through distributed training. It cannot be done always on site training. It just doesn't work that way, because you can't get people together on site for half a day or a couple of hours or something like that. So the idea of virtual boards come into being a very natural way to do things. Okay. And back then we didn't have tools like Miro, but we had some other things, and I was using them. There were virtual whiteboards that basically just mirrored your screen, but wasn't as nice. So the idea of the Miro boards, and this is important to get, it's not just for us to be working together. So it's like I'm trying to use a Miro board to help you learn, but it's also there for you in your coaching. So you're going to be able to use these Miro boards for coaching without being in the train the trainer program. This is just part, the Miro boards are just part of what you get in this workshop. The point is that there's this 3 level. I teach you, you coach your teams use them for what I call asynchronous learning and collaboration. In other words, it's like having a mailbox. You know, I drop something in the mail, somebody reads it, they send it back, we collaborate in a not at the same time, asynchronous, maybe a little technical, but a lot of you know what the word means. Asynchronous, not at the same time training. And what's nicer, though, is that the Miro board represents what we've done. So the Miro board part is really important, because as the coaching represents, we need to be able to convey it. We need to have a vehicle to convey it. And that's what the Miro board's for. And that's also why we do the incremental learning. So these are quite different things. Okay, going to go into the content, because this is really what this is the meat of the matter in terms of what is the workshop about. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this because this is quite different, and it's worth knowing the history of the workshop. So I've been around. I'm going to give a little introduction of myself. Most of you know me already for a fair amount, but the background's kind of useful because I get that there are some things. So I don't believe in the fact that somebody's been around for a while means they know anymore. A lot of people have 50 years of the same experience, so it doesn't do you any good. Experience isn't the indicator to me. However, I've been around since, I've been doing software development since 1970, basically. And I realized recently that there is something I did back in the 80s and 90s that you can't do anymore. Yay for the old school people. And it actually is important. And I never thought about it before until about a month ago. And what that is we're not going to get into UX design or something like that, but I actually know how to do UX design really, really well. And most of what's going on in these days is band-aids on top of just the wrong mindset, in my opinion. I know that's pretty harsh. The wrong mindset, I mean, people are trying to figure out how to make systems more usable. It's not what you're interested in. What you want to do is understand what the customer expects and then have it do that, but guide them in the right way. This is a different mindset. Most developers aren't used to thinking about it this way. So it's not, I'm not saying it's easy to change because it's a perspective change, but I am saying that it's just one or two things to change. And we won't talk about this too much, but we are going to talk about a little bit. And the reason I bring it up now is because what we're trying to do is improve the way customers work, basically innovating and giving them value. The way the customer works is what's called the customer value stream. That's how they navigate and interact with a system. And the interactions with the system are basically what's called the customer journey. And what I was able to do in the 80s, and I did it dozens of times, was take people who had never used a computer before, a company that was not automated, and automate them. You don't find that situation anymore. And I realized, oh, this is interesting. I've got experience looking at the customer journey because that's all I could look at. So I'm not saying I was so brilliant. I was just saying, it was just the way it was. But nowadays, what we try to do is we have a system and we try to improve the system. But no, I'm actually saying, yeah, we are going to improve the system, but we improve it by looking at the customer, not by looking at the system. This is an important concept. And this is basically one of the inherent things in Amplio development is it looks at value streams. And the most important one is the customer value stream. Now, how do you build the customer value stream? Okay, well, that's the development value stream. Okay, great. So we already identified two. There's the customer value stream, there's development that builds it. And some people identify as many as like 14 or 20, but I'm only going to use 4 kinds. One's a customer, one's a development. The other one is I'm going to call operational. There are things you have to do to have software work. So they're setting up servers. They're setting up different accounts. There might even be back-end customer support that the customer doesn't see. So it's not part of their operational value stream. So there's the operational value streams as well. And then finally, there's what I call business enabling value streams, like HR, finance, stuff like that. The customer doesn't see it, but it's part of it. So we're going to talk about these 4. And mostly 80% of this workshop is the development value stream. And there are parts of the development value stream we're not going to really be looking at in the sense that we're not going to do portfolio management. We're not going to be doing a lot of front-end business stuff. I am intending to build that workshop next year. Okay, I know what the content is. So none of this is new, by the way. This is stuff that's been going on for 15 years. And this is another important part about what Amplio is. So there's Amplio, which is the full thing. That's the Amplio means improve in Latin, by the way. And the idea is that's all we're doing. There's no starting. There's always improving. In other words, when you go into an engagement, you're not saying, oh, I'm starting an improvement. They've already been trying to do that. You're saying, well, here we are, and we're improving. And then we're going to keep improving. And we recognize that when you start something, maybe you do something a little different. There's more opportunity for a bigger change. Things like that. So Amplio is based on work I did starting about 20 years ago, maybe not that long ago, maybe more like around 2005. That's when net objectives had gotten to be a little more established. We had a few consultants, Alan Chetalawada, our president at the time, who's one of the top consultants I'd ever met in my career. I was watching him, I was watching some other people who had done some good work. And I basically looked at what does it take to do good work in an organization. We called it business agility. How do you improve business agility? That's basically the ability to add value to customers, companies to be able to add value quickly, sustainably, and with quality and predictably to customers. I do believe in a lot of predictability here. I've been chastised for that, but we'll demonstrate how it can be done. And I analyzed what was necessary, what you had to do. And basically, what I found out was that things were conceptually similar in most organizations, unless you had like hardware, FDA regulations, something like that. Then you had to add those constraints. But more or less, the core was the same. They just implemented it differently. And this seemed to bear out. And now from a consulting point of view, the problem was I had a half dozen consultants and everybody seemed to do it differently. So I couldn't just say, well, do what these guys are doing, because everybody was doing it differently. And some of that was because the companies were different, but to be candid, a lot of that was because the consultants were different. So I began this puzzle of how do you figure out a common way to work that people can tailor to themselves? It's not an easy problem. And it took me 4 attempts and 14 years to figure it out. Okay. And I say 4 attempts because I remember the attempts. They were somewhat effective, but they weren't good enough as far as I was concerned. And the reason I come up with 14 years, because when I went to the PMIs, when I finally nailed it, I'd had it about 80% done with the Flex system flow for enterprise transformation. We turned that into the Discipline Agile Value Stream Consultant Workshop, and that was the first manifestation of it. I, of course, sold all that. So I'm in the process of rebuilding it, but in a better way in my mind. Okay, so that's why I'm taking so long with this. I can't take what I gave to the PMI. I don't own it anymore, but I can rebuild it based on the concepts and new things I've done. So that's kind of what I'm doing. So that's basically what Amplio as a whole is. And Amplio Development is that part of the value stream that focuses on building things. Okay, now I'm going to stop and ask for questions, because that's the basic intro I wanted to give, and then we'll do some Miro board work. But are there any questions?
Yeah, Al, I've got a question.
Please.
You mentioned 4 different types of value streams. In your mind, if I enter a system as a consultant, do I have to nail all 4? It sounds like I really have to have those working at least somewhat. But would you say if you get the development value stream really tuned up, the other ones don't have to? Like, what's proportional? How much
they interact with each other? A full blown. When I get what I haven't quite named it yet, but so think about the full value stream where you get ideas. You first have to have strategies, which is not a part of the value stream. Actually, it's a background context. Yep. Then you do your portfolio management, your allocation, and then it goes over to development. You build the whole thing. You obviously need to deal with all of that. Okay.
Yep.
Now, it's easier to build a piece of something than the whole thing, in my mind, if you know how. Actually, it turns out there are challenges with building things in pieces as well. So what I decided to do is, actually what I first decided to do is, I'm going to come up with a simple, better version of Scrum. And then that got to be, well, that's not what people want. People like yourself want more advanced stuff. So the first workshop quickly morphed into an advanced masterclass. And then I added the coaching to it. Okay, and now we're pretty much reached that level. So in this workshop, what we're going to do is we're going to be doing the development part, which is insufficient. Okay, as you've just alluded to.
Right.
But we will talk about the other 3. Okay, we'll mention how we interact with them. And this is partly why you get free enrollment in the Value Stream Coach, because in the Value Stream Coach, you'll get a little bit more filled in, not all of it still, because we need to look at the business side, which is going to be another workshop I have. Okay. But I will say this, we spend 2 sessions on product management. I don't know product management. We spend 2 sessions on how to do, hate to call it requirements, but how to do better management of what needs to happen. Okay. And the reason for that is there is a lot that, I'm still amazed how there are some core things that I've never seen a company be successful unless they do, that are missing in both Safe and Scrum. And he said, well, wait a moment, you've seen successful implementations of Scrum, you've seen successful implementations of Safe, but I just said all successful have one. I said, yeah, people add this stuff to it. It's not in the common vernacular. And one of them is this thing I'm going to call minimum business increments. If you're familiar with Steve Tendon's work with TameFlow, which I think is brilliant and highly recommend reading his book on TameFlow. He has what he calls a move. Move and MBIs have a common heritage of minimum marketable features, which are nothing like what's in Safe. Safe's MMFs are not the MMFs from Denny and Cleland Wang, even though they say they are. They're just not. They took the name, totally changed it, bastardized lean UX in the process. And so, I don't know, sometimes I'll get on rants with Safe, sorry. But we will relate to the business side that way, because the MBIs and MVPs are ways you hand things and other things Safe's messed up. But that'll be how the business side hands things off to the development side. We're more interested in the development piece. But you're absolutely correct. This is not a full-blown agile at scale approach. What I am planning to do next, in fact, I probably make a survey, because this should let you all guide some of this. So I think of scale in 4 different ways, and I don't believe you scale. I've been ranting against scaling forever. Scaling is the wrong thought process. You don't start at a team and then scale it up. Now I know I'm kind of doing that here, Matt. I'm taking the development and then moving it up to the full value stream. In reality, you want to deal with full value streams at the start. You don't want to deal with hierarchies. This is one of the differences. You don't start at the team and work up, which both Scrum and Safe do, by the way, because yeah, I know they've got big Safe and that whole thing, enterprise, whatever, but everybody starts with essential Safe, which is basically the teams, and then moves up. And then say, oh, you got to need top-down management. See, this is all hierarchical thinking. This is all coming from the hierarchy. No,
as
we
opposed
want to come from the
thinking.
workflow we want to come from value streams. So this is one of the big shifts that we have in Amplio development, is it's organized not around teams going up, not around top down, bottom up, all that. That's like arguing which side of the Titanic should I move to after I've hit the iceberg. It's the wrong dimension. You want to work on the value streams. That's why I start out with the value streams right at the beginning, because that's the basis. And yes, we're not doing all 4. But if I was doing an engagement, I wouldn't start with a development unless that's the only choice I had, which sometimes is. I mean, sometimes an IT guy brings me in. Okay, then what I do is I start, and this is something to keep in mind. So we should have this running dialogue as the workshop goes on. So I'm glad you brought this up, is that as you have challenges dealing with the rest of the organization, that needs to be integrated into this. And it is a little bit, but not as much as it might. So again, if you're thinking about the value stream, you can start showing the front end how they're badly impacting you and influence them that way by demonstrating it. See, when you do hierarchies, it's hard because, man, I'm the boss. I get to tell you what to do. I mean, they may not say that, but some people think that. Or they might just think, well, I'm the boss. I want to do servant leadership. I want to help you. But now it's about the top helping the bottom instead of, hey, we're all in this together. Plus, that's management instead of the business side with strategy and executives. So the whole hierarchical point is really big and a real problem, because it gets people separated right from the beginning. Instead of saying, hey, we're all in it together. It's like a hose. Any part of it jams, the whole thing is jammed. Okay, does that help a lot?
Yeah, that's my number one building block. Is I come into these places, we talk about development value streams, and I immediately run up against what you call the business enabling value stream. Like, you've got somebody in there in the role of product owner, but they have 2 jobs. Yeah. They can't be a product owner because HR is not readjusting like what the agile system of delivery needs, right? It's against the organization, and there it sits until you find a way to address it. So,
well, this brings up another issue that's the biggest difference. So it's not just, so I mentioned a few. I mentioned value streams. I mentioned I mentioned the other 3 things, but I want to talk about this whole, we start with value streams. There's another part to this that's actually kind of getting a certain degree of flack, because I've gotten to be very vocal about it. So Scrum is based on a combination of empirical process control, which they then talk about as empiricism, but it's really empirical process control, which is you basically inspect and adapt, and you don't have a rational rational is the wrong word I'm using. I don't mean rational like crazy or not crazy. I don't mean that. I mean a cause and effect, an explanative, a well-defined, explicit model of what's going on. Schwaber doesn't believe that's possible. This goes back 13 years. Things he said, and I had Don Reinertson. In fact, I should have this as supplemental reading, types of processes if you're interested, by Reinertson. He was gracious and wrote up this long thing about how it is possible to have a well-defined approach in a non-deterministic system. That's what Amplio is. It's a well-defined process in the non-deterministic complex system called knowledge work. Again, I have limited it to knowledge work because I'm not on a manufacturing line, which even there can be knowledge work in some weird way. But my belief is, instead of saying this area is complex, this area is complicated, this, which I'm sure you've heard this from different places. I think, first of all, I don't think that's not the way. What Amplio is also based on is this notion of systems thinking. Deming basically brings us to the fore. Fifth discipline is basically one of my mantras. Russ Akoff is my hero in this area. And in systems thinking, everything is related to everything else, and it's about the relationships between things. And some of those relationships are simple. In fact, some of those relationships are complicated, and some of those relationships are complex, where you can't tell what's going on. You know, my heart affects my lungs, affects my pancreas. Everything is interrelated. It's like, if I change this, what does it do to that? Well, who knows? You know, there's no question. It's complex. You can't figure it out. You get these weird side effects. However, Amplio's attitude is a little different, vastly different. Once you focus on the system and the relationships in the system, and you recognize that some of these relationships are simple, complicated, complex, some are nonlinear, even a little change, or potentially nonlinear, you get a little clog in one artery, you get phlebitis, it's not so bad. You get it in another artery, you're dead. That's what I mean by nonlinear. Okay. Someplace doesn't even hurt you at all. I've got something in my leg. I got a clogged artery in my leg. I had the doctor look at it 10, 15 years ago. I said, oh, it's no problem. It's just that just happens as you get older. No worries. I can feel it. It's a little bump on my leg. And when the first time I noticed it, was like, I better get this thing checked. But I got it checked. Never had a problem with it. Doesn't cause an issue. Put it in the other place, it'd be a big problem.
Yeah.
So what happens, the way Amplio looks at this, is it says we want to take advantage of some things we can determine, look at, knowing that we don't see the whole picture, knowing that there's some complexity there. So if we focus on quick feedback, we'll discover what we didn't know a minute ago. Okay. So we know there's things we can.
Short enough, you don't have to have a theory, is what you're saying. If you keep the feedback.
No, you do need a theory. Well, this is the part of the theory.
This is the theory.
Yeah. So why don't? Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. You're guiding. No, I'm sorry, Matt. Yeah, they're two. I reacted to something you didn't say. Okay. Sorry. So you're right. In some sense, you don't need a theory of how everything relates to each other.
Right.
Because you can navigate with feedback. But to be effective, you need a theory of the part you can understand. You need a theory about the complicated and simple things, so you can take good going forward, making changes based on what you do know, knowing that's not the whole system. And you know they're non-linear. So this is all theory I've been giving you right now. So you take this theory that you have these different types, and then a lot of it you can understand, and that part you don't understand, you get with quick feedback, so you don't fall into risk. Now, this cool about this is in building in the development part, this makes us more effective. This makes us quicker, makes us able to pivot. If the outside world changes with black swan events, which we have no control over, we can't understand, we can't predict, what you want is to be able to respond to that. So the fact that you can pivot based on the development part, you're now responding to changes out there. This is what the guy who wrote Black Swans also wrote a book called Anti-Fragile. This actually can make you stronger when things like this happen, because companies that can pivot can take advantage of this chaos that's there. A lot of people are thriving because of the problems that we're having. I'm not saying they're wishing anything good or bad on things, but you know, when World War II struck out, it started, it was interesting to see that some companies that weren't doing very well took advantage of what shifted and happened. Same thing with this. But there's another
COVID
part.
was great
We
for
don't really
Amazon.
know about customers, what they really need. I'm not claiming you can foresee this, but if you pay attention to the customer journey, you can foresee a lot.
Hmm.
My experience in building software, and I do have a track record on this. I wrote systems in the 80s. These were people who were using DOS, first of all, which is not particularly friendly.
Yeah.
And they were people who had never touched a computer system before. And in some industries, there were people who never wanted to touch a computer before, like the hair salon business. Okay. And they were using my systems in 15 minutes. That's all it took. I got them on 15 minutes of training. They knew how to use it. And why? Because I designed the system to work the way they thought it would work. Back then, I sorted 9A before 10. Didn't need to be left justified, right justified, whatever. That's why I say 9A. You right justify 9A and 10, most systems will put the 10 in first. Doesn't make any sense. Once
Right.
you start doing that, people start losing faith in the system because you know 9A goes before 10. The system doesn't know 9A comes before 10. So now when something odd happens, you got all this craziness and the people don't trust the computer. Then they don't know if it's them or the computer. I see this all the time. Most people don't even notice this. Why? Because they're improving the system.
Huh.
Miro's a little irritating to me. They use ASCII to sort, which is insane. That means all capital letters come before all lowercase letters. So a capital B will come before a lowercase a. Why? Because it's sorted by ASCII. See, that's what I mean by system. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to do for the last 15 minutes. And that's normally I won't go this long. Okay, this one was because I wanted this background here, and I thought that was important. Let me just check the chats.
It's
You know,
just me
actually,
being
it's true about
snarky.
it. Frameworks make easier starts, but they have some real problems. Amplio is not a framework; it's a pattern language.
Yeah. Well, for lack of a better term, at the
Yeah, and there's a question of what is a framework. I've been actually realizing it's difficult to define. But anyway, so here's one thing I would like y'all to do, and I've set it up a particular way. Let me explain why. In the participant information, I added this. I forgot this. The reason the names and emails are confidential is because some people, I don't know, if they do a company, if you don't want to expose your name, I appreciate that, but I highly recommend you put your name and your email here so then we could collaborate with each other. There will be I'm going to set up something a little later about study groups inside as we go, and you might want to do that. But I'm interested in this for just, you know, again, helps me understand. Now, in the curriculum part, there are two pieces that are important that I'm interested in. I'm not going to go through the first principles right now. This is something I'm going to do. Actually, there's some exercises. You can look at it if you want. The first several slides, I'm not going over. They were just, I thought they were interesting, so I left them in there. But what we're going to do is start. We're going to start probably around actually here with a system exercise where one thing I found very interesting with Miro boards is that if you guide people by just letting them dump their instincts, their intuition, what they don't have totally figured out, you let them dump it and make it explicit, they're very often almost on target. They add some stuff they shouldn't, and maybe they leave some things out. But in the process, it means something to them than just listening it and them reading it. Somehow the action of taking your intuitive, what you already almost know, but not quite, and forcing you to write it up. So this exercise we are going to do on Wednesday. Okay. And this isn't but this isn't where we start. I just wanted to point out that we will be doing this one. There's another board. If I come down here to session 1, and by the way, what'll happen is after we videotape this and put it in here under session 1, I'll have another topic that's video recording, you know, so like that. But so this was the mindset and principles board I was just pointing to, but this is something I want to do now. Okay, so you can get in this way. But I'm going to put it in the chat as well. So I'm putting this in the chat, although you can get this from the, in fact, I already see some people are here from Thinkific. But if you haven't done that, okay, I do want to do this now. And the reason I want to do this is another difference of Amplio. The other difference of Amplio, it does not come with a preset start. Well, it actually does. There is a preset start in it, but I recommend against using the preset start. I suggest a minimum amount of tailoring should be done based on where people are. The minimum amount of tailoring is basically 2 questions. Do I have cross-functional teams or not? And the second one is, do I want to use time boxing or flow? Okay. But if you want to start with something like Scrum and consider it an example, you could do that as well. And we'll talk about this. So here's what I want to do. We're going to just do this real quickly. We're going to do this again on Wednesday. I just wanted to, again, this is more of an introduction to the board. Remember, open this guy up here. And this is a very useful board. Okay. This I first used as a way of kind of seeing what your challenge is. It started out as an impediments thing. In fact, here's the instructions. Okay. This can be used by a single team. It can be used by multiple teams. Learning in parallel, it can be used by multiple teams, how they work together. It's actually quite flexible board. It's really could be used as we're going to use it as a bunch of individuals. Oh, here, they do have the frames up now. So you can do it like this, or you can click where you get the name. So this is kind of nice when the boards mean things. So here's what I want to do. Now, the reason I want to do this is I'm starting a workshop with a bunch of people, you. Well, I want to know what your challenges are. Why? I'm not changing the curriculum for your challenges, but I can speak to them better if I know what they are. That's why I'm starting out with this understanding. This is why I'm not having everybody introduce themselves. I want it here on the board. Why? Oh my goodness, we have a lot more people in this workshop than are here. How do I communicate with them? Oh, you can all tell me your stuff, but then people have to listen to it. No, I want to use the board as a way of communicating. This is that thing I was talking about, asynchronous communication. So we're not going to talk about asynchronous communication. We're not going to talk about asynchronous collaboration. We're going to do it because that's the best way to learn. Okay. So look, why don't you go ahead and start? Basically put your challenges, just drag. Oh, this one I didn't quite set up right. I need to put more. Oh, no, I did. I'm sorry. Each row is so if somebody starts one row, like David's about to start in the first row, then somebody else should not stay on that row. They should go down to the next row. So just drag the card over, fill it out. Well, let's focus on the challenges first. Let's just give you a couple minutes for this. Here, I'll put up a timer for 2 minutes. I'll give you 3 minutes for this. This is actually the most important part. So these could be your challenges. This could be your client's challenges. If you're working for a company, those two would merge together. Most of you are consultants. So it could be, I'm having troubles getting this information to people, or my clients are having this. You don't need to specify which it is. I don't really care, but well, you could add it. My clients are having this problem. I'm having this problem. That would be fine. Just start in the red and then we'll move as we go. Now the green needs to go into the green column, which is how we overcome these challenges.
Got it. Okay. So we can
So
use
red is in the red column. This is what our challenge is. And yeah, you can start adding in the green too, how we can overcome these challenges. So just do these all together. In fact, I'm going to bump up and do red and green together. Here are our challenges. If you have an idea, you may not know, I got this challenge. I don't know how to fix it. Now, each row should have its own.
Just one red? No, per.
Yeah, I'm trying to do one red because you're gonna then talk about the green for that. So, but it's easier to see them if they're in separate rows.
So can I have multiple ideas per red note? Or
Yeah,
just one idea at a
if
time?
it's one theme with multiple things, then all in one column all in one row makes sense. That's right. A row represents a challenge you have. And if there are several that relate to that challenge, then yeah, good idea. Nobody's done that before, but sounds good to me.
Okay.
But see, you're going to start putting things on the right, how you can overcome them. So you want anything on the right to relate to the things on the left, but if they're related, then it actually makes sense what you're saying. Then you might say, why are we not overcoming these challenges? So it
But if
depends
there's
how
separate
micro
ideas-
you want to go. If you want to look at the bigger picture, I got these 3 or 4 things, but it's basically one problem, then that makes sense.
But if there's separate problems, separate rows.
Separate
is what you're
rows. Yeah, separate problems, separate rows.
saying. Got it.
See, one beauty about Miro is it's big.
It's infinite, really.
Yeah, basically, if I want to add more rows. Oh, well, it's not letting me now because I've locked it down. But if you own the board, which you will, my plan is, by the way, to release the boards after both sessions because I get some ideas and then I make changes. So now notice people who weren't here today but listen to the session can come in here and they can keep working with it. Now, yeah, some of you have noticed this already. See, I forgot to lock that down. Let's lock that down now. By the way, if you like Control Z before, you will really like it in the Miro board. So the thing is, yeah, if somebody else has the issue, mark it with black, or if you have it to a small extent, you can mark it with a white. Then we're starting to see what the problems are. See, my experience is that a lot of companies have the same problems. In fact, I'm not sure if this is totally right. As I'm doing this more and getting more data, but for a little while, I thought that if you took 100 companies and looked at their problems, that you could find that 80% of their problems, or any one problem, 80% of the problems were shared by 80% of the people. Now, I'm not sure that's totally right. It might be 60% now, but there's a lot of common. Okay.
A lot in common. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, how you solve it is different. So here, let's just now look at me. Let me talk about this because we're about running out of time. I want to finish this in this time. Okay. So the way this board works is you have your challenges, how we can overcome these challenges, then why are we not? What principles, which we haven't learned yet, so I don't do this yet. But see, this is another piece about Amplio that's different. I started this idea almost a decade ago, this value stream impedance scorecard, what works against you, but laying it out, this is the theory I meant we do have, Matt. Working on too many things like Little's Law, delays cause waste, starting too many things in play is a problem. If you can't see it, you can't manage it. There are things like that. And then I've come up with 9 things to look at, and then you could manage these. Now, the rest of the stuff on the board I don't use. I should probably get rid of it, but they're just thought process. So what we'll do on Wednesdays, we're going to spend more time here. We're going to also spend time on learning what these things are. And then the rest of the workshop is actually filling in these columns, not using the board for that. But notice how this creates an awareness of what's going on, that even if you're not here, you can come back and look at it later. This is the asynchronous communication. These boards are designed for you to use with your clients and your team, so they can now use them themselves to continue learning. I think this is really, I won't call it breakthrough in the sense I didn't invent these techniques, but seem to be the only one who's using them in the knowledge work field. So maybe that's a breakthrough. This stuff's been around a long time. This is flipped classroom, back of the room training. It's just basically following basic intelligence stuff. Okay. I'm through with what I wanted to do. Surprising. Not always this well timed. Any questions? You have a few minutes. I don't mind going a few minutes over, but I want to respect that I said this would be an hour. Normally it'll be a half hour of stuff like this and then a half hour Q&A. This one, to kick it off, I thought was worth spending the time. Any questions or comments? Are we good?
No, it seems good. It's just
Okay.
integrating the whole thing is the difference here, right? It's taking all of this stuff that's all necessary, relevant in some times in some places, and knowing when to use which tool seems to be the difference.
That's right. And knowing that some of it'll work real well. So this is where the cause and effect comes in. Some of it'll be a surprise.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think about that. Now, what's nice is as we can accumulate things, we can start seeing what surprises we might get. In other words, I've been in some companies where 80% of the time it works this way, but I've got some other things other ways. It's nice to go looking for that. Like I've had a few failures in my transitions. I've had a pretty high success rate. I'm actually a pretty good consultant, but I've had a few failures. Now, I don't know I could have succeeded with these companies, but I'll tell you one thing, I could have seen I was doomed a lot faster.
Yes, which is its own kind of success.
Which is its own kind of success. It's like Chet Holmes once said, I love, never try to sell a meteor to a dinosaur. It wastes your time and irritates the dinosaur.
I've heard that about wrestling a pig too.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. Okay, now you can also always send me emails and things like that, but there are ways in Thinkific. I should have activated it. There are some conversation abilities. If you've got questions, you could put on Thinkific and definitely on the boards. I would actually prefer questions on the boards, not Thinkific, because then it's there for everybody and let's have questions in one place. Add comments. I'll see you have comments. That's the best way to communicate with me. Please fill out the participant. I highly recommend everybody. Yeah, thanks, David. I recommend everybody just lay it all out there. I just didn't want to assume it's okay. Because if we know your name and all that, somebody could find out what company you work at, and then maybe you don't want that to be known. So, I respect your privacy. The agreement here is nobody talks about this outside of the company. What happens in Amplio stays in Amplio. Maybe we'll say that. Okay. But we will start. It'd be nice to learn together. There are, by the way, about in fact, this represents most of y'all. There are about 9 new people, and then there are a lot of people who are in the first version. This is going to be a lot more stable. Hopefully, it already looks a little bit more stable, but they're taking it again. And you have a year-long program. That's the whole point. The structure, just to summarize that, 4 months here, then the 4-month value stream coach, which is every other week now, and then just 4 months to be in the program. And you will get free registration in the next offering of this. Okay, that's usually meant for in case you missed a session and want to go. So you get actually to sit through this twice if you want, but in parallel you do the other thing. My idea is I'm trying to create a different way of being effective and have coaches, and the train the trainer program. I'll say this one thing here. People can participate at different levels. If you want to actually contribute to building things, that's going to be available, but you don't have to. That's, in other words, there's one program and then people can do what they want. The first few months are going to be train the trainer type things, but then we're going to get into a licensing program. So I'll talk about that more later. If you're interested, just mark it here and I'll keep you in the loop. There is a train the trainer. I'll add it to this. There is a train the trainer sheet that for some reason I didn't put up here. I'll do that. I'm going to close this. I'm going to put that up here. Thanks for coming. Stay in touch. I'm pretty excited about this. I think we kind of have this a lot more organized. Thank those of you who are new this time should be thanking this is their second pass because they made this a lot easier for you. Take care.